Have you ever wanted to be the first to know if aliens really exist? Well, with Nebula, you can be! Nebula is the streaming service that's home to It's Probably Not Aliens, as well as our YouTube channels. And the best part? All of our content goes up early on Nebula. So when we break first contact with ET, you'll be the first to find out. That's right, you'll be able to listen to the next episode of this show before anyone else. Plus, we post bonus content that you won't find any other place. And the best part? By signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/probablynotaliens, you're directly supporting the show and both of us. So don't wait any longer. Join Nebula today and be the first to know if this time it really is aliens.
You play Pokemon, or do you not?
Currently?
Have you ever played a Pokemon?
I mean, I was born
video game, not the card game. I don't care about the card game.
I did play the card game a little bit, but
what did I just say? I don't care about the card game.
I was indeed born in the year of our Lord 1988, which means that Pokemon hit North American audiences when I was 9 years old. And so
a great time.
Yeah, I definitely got hit extremely hard by like the Pokemon phase of the 90s. And then I remember being really, really pumped for Gold and Silver. I remember I watched the anime pretty closely on YTV. And then I think sometime after the release of Pokemon Crystal and before the Ruby Sapphire period, I kind of drifted away because of high school. And I think I came back briefly for Pokemon Go and then bounced off that too.
I had a very similar trajectory, which is weird because you and I are not exactly the same age. We're a little different.
But this is a critical age for specific Pokemon stuff, I think.
Yes. So you were 9. I guess I must have been
6.
I guess I'm not that much younger than you, 5 or 6. Either way, I watched a little bit of the anime. It was fun. I, played a little bit of Red and Yellow, and then Gold and Crystal. Crystal, I think, is still my favorite. And then I dropped off, not because I didn't care about Pokemon anymore, but simply because I didn't have a Game Boy Advance growing up, and my parents wouldn't get me one. So I was just stuck with Game Boy Color games. And so then they didn't make any more Pokemon after Crystal for Game Boy Color. So I didn't play Pokemon until now, until literally right now.
Now, you told me about this and I have a little question about it.
Yeah, I got myself a little retro handheld and I'm playing Pokemon Emerald for the first time. I'm in the 3rd gen and it's my wife's favorite gen of all the Pokemon, so she's very excited that I'm playing.
Now, did this come the image in my mind is that you borrowed this Game Boy to do your Scooby-Doo speedrun video, and then it just kind of stuck around, and now you're playing other things.
Yes. So what happened is Emily had a Game Boy Advance, still does, and has several Nintendo DSs. She's got a DS Lite and a 3DS. And I never had any of those growing up, but I did borrow hers to do a couple different video game videos on my YouTube channel. And because I was like, well, if I'm going to do more of these, I'm going to get myself a retro handheld. So I'm not using hers anymore. I'm using one of those Anbernic devices that can play ROMs of these are retro handheld devices that play ROMs of old games. So I'm playing on the Anbernic RG35XXH, which is it looks like a little Nintendo Switch, but it plays retro games. And So I've been doing that, and I loaded up Pokemon Emerald just for fun, and my wife noticed that I did that. And I wasn't even planning on playing Pokemon Emerald. I just wanted to see if it would work because I had just got it in the mail the other day, and I was like, well, let me play. And she heard the sound of me booting it up and was like, I know that sound, and was so excited about me playing Pokemon 3rd gen, her favorite gen. She played Ruby, that now she got me back into it. So for the first time ever, I'm on Gen 3 Pokemon. And I can tell by the lights flashing across your face as I'm speaking that you are currently looking up retro handheld stuff. Did I accidentally unlock a new area of interest for you?
Well, because it sounded like it's kind of like it's got its basis in like an Arduino or like a Raspberry Pi type things. And I love those kinds of things. And I was more just being like, how much these things? I just out of curiosity, and I saw it's like $50. I'm like, okay.
The ones that I'm using, like they only play up to like PS1 games, nothing further than that. So like no GameCube, no PS2 or anything like that. Those are pretty affordable, I find. Sometimes they're on like a fire sale for like $30.
Interesting.
It's good stuff.
Where do you buy this?
Do what?
Where do you buy this? What website?
You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them on AliExpress. You can buy them directly from their website. If you have any interest, I would recommend this to anybody. My favorite channel, my favorite overall channel who talks about this stuff is Retro Game Core. Very chill vibes, very knowledgeable, and helped me pick out this specific device because I think he said it's the one that I have is his current favorite way to play retro games. So I was like, all right, cool. I will also do it. If it's your favorite, I'll do it.
That fucking rules. This is a thing that I would want because I'm like finding, maybe, I don't know if this is your case, but I am finding that that mobile games are bad.
Okay, interesting.
I find myself with a lot of time where I can't really do much but be on my phone because I have a 2-year-old. So I end up well, it's 6:15 in the morning and I'm on the couch in the living room and he wants to play with his trucks. So I'm just going to
scroll on your phone.
And if I turn on the TV will become bluey. So I have to to not screen time him, I have to do stuff on my phone. And you can only play Slay the Spire so many times before you're a little burnt out on it. So I'm like,
if you do what I do, which is take a year off between playing Slay of Spire and then reset, start from the beginning and unlock everything, then it's still pretty fun.
That'd be a good one. But I'm I'm just I'm always in the market for something that I can do that can entertain me while I'm while my son's having fun playing with his toys and I'm kind of just watching him.
Retro handhelds, man. They're everywhere. They're great. There's literally so many different models of them that it was hard to pick, which was why I can't recommend.
I'm seeing one right now that looks like the Game Boy Color that I had when I was 10 years old.
Yeah. They're designed in a way where they look like that. Some of them have triggers on the back too for the more advanced games and things like that require it.
That's wild.
It's great. I mean, a lot of Super Nintendo games really play so well in handheld mode.
Yeah, I mean, I had a Game Boy Advance or I had a Game Boy Color, and some of the first games I got that were not Pokemon were just ports of Super NES games. I didn't even know that Link's Awakening was the name of that game. I thought it was called Zelda DX because I remember that's what I thought of it as. So this is a tech gaming podcast called.
This is a tech gaming podcast. So the reason I bring up Pokemon, the reason I wanted to talk about Pokemon, but we ended up talking about retro handhelds, and I unlocked a new niche interest of Tristan's now. But the reason I was talking about Pokemon is because I've never played the 3rd gen before, and I'm now getting acquainted with Team Magma and Team Aqua, which are brand new to me when I'm so used to fighting Team Rocket. Boom. That's my segue into today's episode about rockets. Team Rocket blasting off again, just like this podcast. Hi, my name is Scott. This is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens, where we look at ancient astronaut theory and the TV show Ancient Aliens, and we look at their claims and debunk them while teaching you about real world history behind cool places and people and cultures and stuff like that. My name is Scott. I know nothing especially about the 3rd generation of Pokemon. I'm catching all the Pokemon because I genuinely don't know what any of them do. So I'm making sure I have all of them at my disposal. That's what I'm doing.
My name is Tristan Johnson, and I have heard the term Rayquaza, but I could not tell you for the life of me what that is. I know that is a Pokemon. I couldn't tell you the first thing. But yeah, today I am also the resident expert on stuff to do with this show, which is about ancient astronaut, ancient aliens, pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology, pseudoscience, and all of that stuff done from the perspective of us two goofballs. And we're deep into our season on alien tech.
Whoa. I might have a sound effect. Alien tech.
Ooh.
Yeah, that'll work.
Sure.
Why not?
Welcome our guest today. What's his name?
Christopher Nolan?
Christopher Nolan, yeah.
I knew exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, just like here on the podcast today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Christopher Nolan. Say hi, Chris. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
That's awesome, Chris. And like and you're working on a new project. Tell us about that. Okay. Well, I'm excited to see where Batman 4 goes.
That was such a dumb joke, but I love it.
Yep.
Speaking of dumb jokes, ancient aliens. Okay, so today we're talking about chariots of fire and other such phenomenon. Yeah. So here's what millions of people around the world believe.
Hit me up with that claim.
Okay. So this is what...
Is that normally the one we do? I changed the sound effects.
I'll go for it. So ancient astronaut theory suggests that descriptions of things like chariots of fire or flying boats or flying turtles, all of these sort of like references in ancient myths are actually references to spaceships, rocket ships, spacecraft used by the aliens to come here.
Absolutely. I believe I have a clip or two from the TV show Ancient Aliens, if you'd like to take a look at, listen to how they talk about this claim.
Go for it.
If you look at the Greek gods, they were all described as flying in on chariots of fire. Well, chariot of fire to me seems very clearly like it's some sort of rocket, probably burning its retros as it lands somewhere in ancient Greece.
So that's basically the claim.
Yeah.
I have another one that I pulled and I can't remember what it is. So I'm going to play it at a random point in the show.
Let's see what happens. Okay.
We'll see how that goes.
So the biggest proponent of this theory, for example, this is part of the bread and butter of like Eric von Daniken and...
I was going to say Chariots of Fire sounds a lot like Chariots of the Gods from von Daniken.
Yeah, this is some kind of like if we were to break down Ancient Aliens to like its like most base elements, How Move Big Rock is one of them, and the other is like this thing from mythology is actually technology / aliens / something.
Mythology technology
is like a pretty good that's a pretty good shtick. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's a t-shirt.
We can't forget, since I'm doing the soundboard now more often, we can't forget I've loaded it up with How Move Big Rock.
How do you move it?
How do you move it?
Yeah.
Also, from the previous episode, I believe, I pulled this one of this small clip of Georgios Tsoukalos that was from a bigger clip, but I think this one works pretty well.
We're struggling.
So that was it. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So basically, like the claim is that like the chariots of fire from like Greek mythology, but also probably the most famous, well-known chariot of fire is that from the book of 2 Kings in the Bible with the prophet Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
But also other, former guest or common recurring guest on this show, vimanas.
Friend of the show. Friend of the show, vimanas.
Yeah, we have like a little panel today between the vimanas and Christopher Nolan. So they're going to.
Chris, what do you think about vimanas?
Geez.
That's awesome, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can air that one, Chris. That was a little too.
Yeah, they don't let you.
Might get canceled for that one.
They don't let you say that anymore. But also other ones get roped in, like the flying shields of Hopi mythology, or otherwise known as the patuvas. Or flying boats, the ships without wings, also from Hopi petroglyphs. Or in other Native American myths, you have flying turtles or Thunderbirds as like references to potential flying things. So is Quetzalcoatl the summon from Final Fantasy? Is that based on a depiction of an alien flying saucer from Native American mythology?
Potentially.
So
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So these myths have a really cool and interesting deep purpose that we're going to get into a little bit later. But for now, let's just entertain the idea. Like, are these depictions of spaceships from space?
Are they depictions of spaceships from space? This sounds like a great time for me to play the mysterious sound clip that I think talks about that.
When rockets are taking off, it's best to stand back and get out of the way. And that's a lot of what the ancient legends are about too. When the gods came and went, it may well have been just these rockets or other aerospace vehicles landing and taking off and making a lot of smoke and noise.
That was Dave Childress, who is clearly incredibly high during the filming.
I was going to say, like David feels like he's had a couple, like what's it called, Mike's Hard Lemonades, before he started talking about that. That does sound like somebody's uncle talking to you at a barbecue or something like that, and be like, "The rocket's taking off." Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The uncle version of a wine mom.
I pulled so many clips of David Childress for this season of our show.
Oh God!
Because the way he describes things, I do. He's my favorite now. I'm glad I got to see him in person. I'm less glad that I paid him money to see him in person. But he's the way he talks, and I don't like making fun of the way people talk, but like he's so funny.
He does sometimes give off like burnout stoner from the 60s vibes.
Yeah.
Which honestly matches up with like sort of the intellectual movements that led to ancient alien stuff. So I buy into that. Okay. So let's run all of these down because it's a bunch. This is another one of those, like, this is a one of the genders of claims, and then comes in various different sort of, this is like what would have been like a grab bag episode in like previous iterations of this show. But because there's because this episode had a lot of like, here is a flavor of claim, and then here is like 5 or 6 examples of what those could be. And that's kind of why I have some of these done this way. Don't worry, we have episodes that are all about one thing that are also, I mean, we just had the Jericho one 2 episodes ago, but there'll be more things like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, this is kind of one of those. So first example, 2 Kings, chapter 2, verse 11.
Bible. From the Bible.
Yeah. In this thing, so this is part of the Bible that I know only as like the part where there's various prophets that say God is very mad at us and nobody listens to them, and then God gets mad at them and bad stuff happens. I think there's a good chunk of the Bible that's basically made up of that.
That's a lot of the Old Testament, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess Elijah's one of those, and in his in 2 Kings, he is taken to heaven in a whirlwind that is accompanied by a chariot with horses made of fire, which has been interpreted to be an alien spacecraft. We also can go to the vimanas, the classic, which are sort of these, for anyone who doesn't know, because, you know, why would you, like, it's from like episode 2 of this podcast. So,
right. It was a long time ago. We talked about vimanas.
But as we picked up, Hinduism is maybe like the most heavy metal, like it is basically the religion version of Dragon Force. So vimanas in Hinduism are these references to basically flying chariots, but sometimes they're also referred to as like flying castles or palaces that the gods ride around in. So these are found in the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana, and again are described as flying chariots, castles, those kinds of things. But if you just ignore the words they use and then use different words, you can say that those are flying machines and UFOs and cars.
And famously, the Bhagavad Gita was quoted by Oppenheimer. And I mean, was that a reference for you, Chris, when you were making your movie about him?
How do you move? How do you move?
Wrong one. Chris, be serious. Thank you.
Maybe with a little bit less swearing next time. But yeah, like the thing is that there are texts like the Samarangana Sutradhara it is a Sanskrit book from the 11th century that is a discussion of classic Indian architecture.
Okay.
And in that, it does reference Vimana construction and operation, which includes mercury and fire chambers that achieve flight. Again, it's an interesting bit of like speculation and science fiction, but like then the people in Ancient Aliens were like, so they use mercury, a metal that we have known about for thousands of years and have never been able to make it fly. And then saying that it was one of those, because remember they had that whole thing about like flywheels and
oh, right. Yeah.
And that you could just do that. Again, so that's part of the claim about that. Then in Hopi mythology, you have flying shields, and called in their languages patuvotas. I'm gonna go with that.
Patuvotas.
Which,
sure.
if from what I remember, this is the thing about Hopi mythology has a lot of stuff about how the world had ages in the past where there were more like mythological things, and so they had references to like flying shields, which they depict. Then Ancient Aliens picks up and says that's a UFO. That's an.
So when Captain America throws his mighty shield, and all those who oppose, all foes who chose to oppose his shield must yield. You know that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did they think he's throwing a UFO? Probably not.
Man, Marvel. I was thinking about this on our break between episodes. I'm wondering, like, I don't think anyone's gonna ever speak up, but who do you think is like the most famous listener of this podcast? And I'm like, is there like a random Chris Evans or something that could be like, lean into that? But
that's a good question. If you think you're famous, email us. We're not going to have you on the show. We're just curious.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan was the only like A-lister that we've ever actually gotten on the show. So
yeah, he left actually a couple minutes ago, so I won't be hitting that button anymore.
We got past the rule of threes, and he decided to leave.
Yeah. I did. We got to the rule of threes, and right when I was going to do the rule of fours, I hit the wrong button. So I think that's probably the best comedic outcome we could have possibly done.
Perfect. But yeah, like this whole idea is that these flying shields from Hopi mythology are references to aliens, or just like the flying turtles or Thunderbirds or various other depictions of something big and fiery in the sky, or something flying that isn't normally flying, that kind of thing. These are not, artistic interpretations. They don't have religious significance. They're depictions of descriptions using their tiny little unoriginal brains to describe UFOs, flying saucers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We're struggling.
That's it, right?
Yeah. So that's the claim at its core. So why don't we're going to start with the Chariots of Fire situation. But first,
I would love to. Okay.
Have you heard about the good word of product?
I can never hear it too many times.
All right, let's tell you about the good news of product and service.
Let's do it.
Love the good word of product
Yum.
and service.
I imagine whatever it was yummy.
Mm-hmm. So, Chariots of Fire. Let's start with that. So, it is again the vehicles that took the prophet Elijah to heaven in the book 2 Kings of the Bible. So
yeah, this is the sequel to the first Kings.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get most of the original crew back.
This is the book that I think Donald Trump, while talking at a Christian university, once referred to as Two Kings.
Two Kings. Two Kings.
Which is
Two Kings, Too Furious.
That was like probably one of the funniest Donald Trump, like, while he was like courting like the Christian right, like very obviously didn't understand, like it's like very obviously he didn't know anything about the Bible, but tried anyway. And it turned out they didn't care. Fun stuff. So yeah, like the idea is that Elijah and his successor Elisha were walking and talking. They were doing the classic what's that guy's name?
Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, they're doing the Aaron Sorkin thing where they're walking and talking about God.
Doing a walk and talk. Don't have a sound effect for Aaron Sorkin.
No. And then the chariot of fire shows up. Horses made of fire appear and separate the two of them. And then Elijah's taken up to heaven with a whirlwind. So, like, what could this be other than alien representation? Well,
What could? There's nothing else it could be, Tristan.
yeah, let's take a look at maybe some other stuff to see if
you
maybe there's
insist.
some symbolism or interpretations that might have informed this depiction of God and heaven this way.
No. Sorry. Everything before I existed is historical, factual record. It's not. There's no symbolism. There's no artistic merit. There's no. It's everything that came before me is historical fact, and that every record that came before is fact. Right? No one would just create stories that have significant meanings in symbolism. That's ridiculous.
People just lie like that on the internet?
Would people lie like that in the Bible?
Yeah. So I mean, I know that this will involve taking a symbolic interpretation of the Bible, which is not everyone's favorite thing to do, but let's dig into it. So
that's true.
The first is,
I was joking about it, but then I realized that there are actually people who think everything in the Bible is literal. So I apologize. Apparently,
they're not the kind of people who listen to this podcast.
I don't think so.
So, anyways, the things that we stick out here are the chariot, the concept of a chariot with horses, and fire. Those are like the things that stick out. So, one, the first thing that anybody who knows a bit about the Bible would know is that fire in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, frequently is used to represent God, his presence, his power, his holiness. For example, Exodus, God is depicted as a burning bush. But I mean, I think there is even like some Christian denominations today where like their symbol has like fire involved with it. Like I think the Presbyterians or something like that have.
Super hope they don't mix that with the cross. Having both of those. You get what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
I mean, a burning cross, sort of a bad idea.
I don't imagine that it's the Methodists. The Methodists have a symbol, but in the end though, I do think it's that's uncomfortable and also kind of I think what they were trying to do, like what the KKK was trying to do.
Fair enough.
But yeah, if you look at like the official symbol of the Methodists, it's sort of like a cross with like a sort of flamey thing coming out of it.
That's wild. I never knew that.
So there's that, and then angels. So the idea that chariots and horses of fire, like the other thing about like things coming out of the sky and being, depicted as things of flame, is a common depiction of angels. As we talked about before, and one of the ways, like in a time where you don't have science fiction to show you the UFO, tractor beam that picks people up from the ground.
Right.
You would then, if you were to have a story about like how, like, because the story is about how Elijah went to heaven and had all this revelation.
Right.
So,
and how do people go to places?
Yeah.
In chariots.
Yeah. In some sort of,
or they walk.
Yeah.
But
you can't walk to heaven, unfortunately.
There's no stairway to heaven.
Not yet.
Unfortunately.
What's it called? They hadn't written the song yet.
Haven't done it yet.
Led Zeppelin hadn't written the song yet. Apparently like the proper noun part of my brain is just left. It's just out of the building.
I let you handle that one because I have such a big blind spot in my head for music that I couldn't tell you who made what song. So
so like why a chariot? Why is that like a big deal? And it's because in the Middle East, where which is that's the place where the Bible takes place.
Sure, okay.
Chariots are a common symbol associated with things like war, but also like royalty and divine intervention.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, in like
it's like a car.
Yeah, in the deep, deep past, like in the Bronze Age, before the Iron Age, there was this period where warfare was very different than it is today, or even than it was in the Iron Age, because to make the sort of stuff that you needed to make bronze was a very expensive process. It required international trade. This is why, like, this period in the Bronze Age, you saw, like, these very centralized, powerful governments, because it basically, to arm and armor soldiers, you needed a lot of money. So this was like a period where you almost could be too poor to join the military. So
I feel like it's the opposite way now.
Yeah.
At least in America, it's like,
yeah,
we keep people poor so that we can persuade them to join the military.
It's definitely not part of it. So in that period, chariots, which became a common, like they were like sort of the high military tech of their days. They were like the tank, the big new innovation. Chariots were a very powerful tool because they were a way that like elites who were armored could fight. That was not like, less dangerous, but also meant like a lot more mobility and a lot more ability to just like be more mobile on the battlefield than just going like, on foot.
Yeah. Wheels. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And so they became very useful if, say, you were like not like a high ranking member, if you were like part of the nobility, if you were aristocracy, or even if you were the king in these fights. Yeah. So chariots then became sort of the symbol of royal power or just military power in general. Be like if somebody was walking around with a tank today,
I was going to say, yeah, it's like it's a military vehicle. It's just a big, I was going to say flying a drone. The whole point of a drone is that there's no person in there, but yeah.
If there was, it'd be like walking around. It'd be like somebody walking around with like a Hummer just out of the blue.
Yeah. Just a Hummer. Yeah.
So Elijah went to heaven in a Iron Age Hummer. So cool. So like, yeah, when the Iron Age happened, which is when the Bible, like a lot of the Old Testament takes place, the Bronze Age had already collapsed, but these symbols still remained as like power status things. And so the chariot kind of had this association with royalty and power. And it's
the same association that in like another decade or two, we're going to associate with like Cybertrucks, where it's like the nobility, the greatest people of our society have these things, and it's associated with Cybertrucks. Cybertrucks are obviously the best, and we all love them, and the people who drive them.
I can't, bud. I can't do it. It's such a good.
Can't even pretend to be on board.
Toy car is so bad.
It's so bad.
Yeah, and again, Elijah's ascension to heaven and the chariot of fire, like having that kind of like symbols of divinity, of power, of angels, is a way to symbolize that Elijah is indeed a prophet, one of like the major figures in Judaism. And like you saw this with Ezekiel when we did the episode on Ezekiel, that also him seeing this like depiction of angels was another thing. Like these kinds of like amazing supernatural occurrences where they get these prophecies are the ways to cement them as like bona fide, genuine prophets. Yeah,
it's sort of just like if you had any doubt before, this happened. So they've been validated.
Exactly. Vimanas, I'll try to go a little bit quicker, but yeah, they show up in things like the Bhagavata Purana and the Ramayana. They're they're big in Hinduism, in sort of ancient Hindu myths. The most famous is probably the Pushpaka Vimana, which was created by the divine architect Vishwakarma for the god Brahma, the big god that created everything, but was later then given to Kubera, the god of wealth, and subsequently seized by the demon king Ravana. And after Ravana's defeat, Lord Rama used it to return to Ayodhya. Like, as I said,
a lot of proper nouns here.
Hinduism is has a lot of story. Like I said, it's got like, there's comic book narratives. It's intense.
Yeah.
But the Pushpaka Vimana is described as a large self-propelled aerial vehicle that can travel anywhere at will. 2 stories tall with chambers and windows adorned with flags and banners that could rise into the high atmosphere and could carry many passengers. So like, this is like a mythological part of like the Hindu, like of like ancient Hindu, like mythology.
Yeah.
Other Vimanas show up throughout various times in history, like the Mahabharata, which is a book that contains many depictions of Vimanas, including like there being like battles in the sky between them.
Hell yeah.
It's a book that the Mahabharata is like a depiction of like a giant war between the gods, basically. And it's used to attack a city of Dvarka. If you remember Dvarka, the place that was destroyed in another episode that we did. And another thing
that was that about ancient nukes.
Yes, it was definitely in that vein, or around that time. And there's also just like a notable mention of a celestial chariot that belonged to Indra, who's another like god who and Arjuna, the sort of Hindu god of war, used that to travel to the heavenly city of Amaravati. It's like a chariot that could fly in the sky and travel through the sky with ease.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, but then but it's never referred to as technology. It's referred to as like cool flying like chariots and flying castles and stuff like that, because it was cool and metal. The only reference to it being a technology comes from the Vaimanika Shastra, which is this 20th century text that claims to be based on ancient knowledge and provide a detailed description of vimanas having a construction, propulsion methods, and even materials to use. But this text is considered a quote, modern creation.
Yeah. This is not an old text. It's old by you and me standards.
Yeah.
Because we're young and hip.
Yeah, because it's from like either the 1920s or the 1950s, depending upon what
it could be less than 100 years old, or it could be around 100 years old. Either is not great.
Yeah, it's definitely not a usable source contemporaneous to this period. So then what are like vimanas actually? Because I think that we never actually talked about that in the vimanas episode. And so
how is that possible?
Yeah. So scholars have been looking into this. And again, just like with the Chariots of Fire, the idea is that like having a being so powerful and so godly that you can have a castle that flies in the sky, it's sort of another symbolic representation of the divine power of the gods. And it's like an idea of them thinking of something big and powerful to show off the big powerfulness of the gods.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you have a castle. Mine is in the sky. Yeah. My castle is literally above your castle.
Exactly. And furthermore, they also might have a metaphorical purpose to represent things like spiritual journeys, like ascension, and such.
Yeah. There's a lot of myths and religions and stuff that are about up.
Yeah.
Right? Ascension, going up to heaven or where have you.
Where all the stars and stuff are, yeah.
Riding stars, going to space. Yeah, like everything is like up. Up is cool. Up is good.
Mostly, I think just because like the sky is this place you famously can't go, and also at night shows like this like grand celestial display. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving over to the Hopis, the flying shields are described as these advanced flying devices in what was called the Third World, which is part of their like cycles of existence. And that they had this ability to attack distant cities and travel between locations, which again is the ancient aliens people suggest was this idea that they were modern aircraft or flying saucers. It comes from the term for their name Patuvota, which comes from the Hopi word pa, which means water, and tuvota, which means shield.
Water shield.
Is probably a reference to like the expanded concentric rings of water, which might describe how these flying things would move.
Like if you drop a pebble in the water and the rings sort of go out of it, like those rings. Okay.
So
wow, 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 wow. That's the sound they made. Wow, 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 wow.
So to understand what these things are, is that the Hopi have this belief that time is cyclical, and that in the Third World, which was destroyed by floods, that these flying shields played a large role. The destruction of the world and advanced civilization is a recurring theme. So like basically what they're talking about is that the Hopi believe that in the Third World that there was this ancient advanced civilization that was then destroyed by the flooding. And so their way of talking about what an ancient advanced civilization might have is something like a flying shield.
Oh, Captain America. Pretty advanced.
It's sort of an idea like Atlantis, where Atlantis was this like advanced civilization that had all these amazing things and then sank because they were too proud. You know, they were corrupted. And according to the Hopi, these flying shields are probably at the bottom of the sea, along with many of the cities and treasures that were destroyed during this period. And when the Fourth World started, they were corrupt, or they were considered evil and something that you should not look for by Sotugnang, who is the one of the Hopi gods that when the Fourth World was created.
Yeah. So there's treasures and stuff. Don't go looking for it. It'll corrupt you too.
Yeah, and which it wraps up into being, because the Hopi are a civilization that has a lot of stories that have to do with being against individual glory and fame, and about like collective purpose and collective kindness. Like for example, a previous episode we talked about the ant people of the Hopi, where the ants were these people who live beneath the earth that during a cataclysm where the humans might have been wiped out, the humans went into the caves, because there's lots of caves in the area where the Hopi live, that these ant people helped them survive the cataclysm by like, collective work. Because the Hopi live in a very arid, dry climate where, the sort of wasteful, like the resource waste and excesses of being in a society where everyone has to own their own things are kind of, it's kind of a liability. So a lot of their mythological construct have to talk about like how being too ambitious, too advanced, too greedy,
flying too close to the sun.
Yeah, they have a lot of that to sort of tamper that down. But it meant that, like, it was another piece of like imagination, like that this is like going to be a thing, and that according to the Hopi, that these are going to return at some point in the future. There's this idea called the blue star Kachina, who's a spirit who appears as a blue star, is going to come and a new world is going to start. And that there's going to be like a day of purification, and that where the old world is destroyed and a new one begins. So it's like another, again, a part of their concept of cyclical time.
Yeah, I like it. Hey, for anyone who's wanting like a cool new superhero name that can tie in with like a fun culture sort of thing, Blue Star is pretty good, and just like sort of tie it into that culture.
Yeah. Oh man, a superhero, like a Hopi superhero named the Blue Star.
A Hopi superhero named Blue Star. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Now the other ones we talked about were a little bit about the flying turtles and the Thunderbirds. So these come from a couple things.
Yes.
So the flying turtle is from the Oneida people. And they have a whole legend about the flying turtle, or how the turtle flew south for the winter. So the legend says that there's a story of a turtle who wanted to fly south for the winter, and he convinced two geese to carry him by holding a stick in his mouth while they flew. But the turtle opened his mouth to boast about his being able to fly, and then he fell and learned a valuable lesson about humility. So that is the flying turtle from the Oneida legend.
Like, that's a great moral, by the way. Like, great, like, one of those tales that you tell and to learn a lesson and stuff like that. I think that's really great. Not aliens.
It's like an example of like the fact that like the Oneida people had like a sense of humor, because it's meant to be funny.
Yeah. And it is. It's great.
Elon Musk, the turtle, who keeps trying to boast about work that other people are doing. Yeah, so like that, but that's like a fairly common story. But then that, if you can imagine how that then gets twisted into the Native Americans wrote about flying turtles. Could that have been a UFO?
Now, they were just trying to write down how their mind processed it. All right, they didn't know flying saucers and aliens. All they knew was turtles and wings. So that's how they processed it in their legends, in their lore. And that's why it's aliens.
We're struggling.
Yeah, so like that's like another. They're struggling to make the point make sense.
Yes,
but like all good stories, this spread to other places. But like the Oneida have it, but there's also the Kachuamai, who is a golden turtle with wings and eagle claws, sort of mythological creature that is part of. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to see who they're from. But like we have multiple depictions of monsters in mythology. This is actually from India.
Yeah, we got Gamera. Gamera is another flying turtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is actually from India. So, Native American, not Native American. This is a India thing. But yeah, and we already know about their whole thing where they have monsters and demons and all sorts of stuff like that. So this is like a golden turtle that has wings and eagle claws. You can imagine a turtle with claws and wings would be a pretty cool monster. And there's a story.
Not as cool as a turtle with rocket boosters for legs.
That is true.
Which I believe happens a little bit sometimes with Gamera.
And there's even a story here where he confronts a demon named Barnara and uses his voice to lull the demon to sleep and defeat him.
Mm.
Now, flying turtles, there is like stories of flying turtles made of impenetrable iron. Again, these are people who knew that metal existed, so it's not like a thing that they wouldn't have known about. But some nations known like the Delaware or the East Pomo have legends that there were these flying turtles that were made of impenetrable iron that could drill into the earth and had associations with like creation myths and knowledge and all that kind of stuff.
Turtles, man. We talked about turtles not too long ago. Turtles, pretty big in a lot of myths.
There's like certain types of animals that it seems that humans are like irresistibly attracted to, like to build up, like snakes and like.
Gosh, I thought you were going to say irresistibly attracted to turtles, and I was going to have you explain that one to me and maybe walk that sentence
I
back.
was like halfway through that sentence and I realized like, oh, I need to veer a little bit.
Well, the thing about turtles is they have so many different holes, Tristan.
Okay. Okay, you went there.
I meant to say that line as you, but then I said your name at the end of it, so now people are going to think that I, Scott, am saying that. No!
Now I'm like, now I need to learn what a Scott impersonation of Tristan sounds like.
I know. I need like an ew sound effect on this board, like that classic like TikTok like ew sound.
But again, like this is like these parts of mythology could like have many explanations. Like it's not like the Native Americans didn't know about iron. It's not like they didn't know about turtles. It's not like they didn't see a cave that they could spark their imagination about drilling holes into the earth. Like I could very much see this about this being like the explanation for how, like who dug the caves and like things like that. Cause I imagine, now moving on to Thunderbirds. So Thunderbirds are this other supernatural creature that shows up in multiple Native American mythologies that is like a bird that's associated with thunder, lightning, and storms. So Zapdos. Yeah. Zapdos.
It's Zapdos from Pokemon.
Yeah.
I was going to mention Ponyta and Rapidash when you're talking about the chariots of fire being.
There you go. There you go.
And things like that. It's all related to Pokemon.
Is there a Pokemon that's a golden turtle with wings and eagle claws? That feels like a Pokemon. That should be a Pokemon.
No, but there is the one we talked about the other day, the Torterra, which is a big tortoise with the like entire trees and mountain ranges on its back.
Yeah. Whoever is doing Pokemon right now, go take that one. Turtle with wings and eagle claws. Do it.
Do it.
You kind of have, if you can kind of imagine, aren't there like turtles with wings in, there's flying turtles in Mario, right?
Yeah, they got flying turtles in Mario.
Yeah. So this is...
Bring them over to Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. So the Thunderbird is often depicted as this large bird that can create thunder by flapping its wings and lightning by flashing its eyes. You see the Thunderbird in various different traditions and myths. The Algonquin has this belief that the Thunderbird controls the upper world and battles the underwater panther or the great horned spirit. So it's a protector of humans that uses lightning to fight the underworld. Again, this is another case of like that shows up often in mythology of needing to explain intense and important natural phenomenon. And like it feels like if you're like getting thrown off by this, it's like I feel like every civilization ever has had a strong need to describe what thunder and lightning are, because if you don't know the science behind it, it's quite intense.
It's kind of just loud sounds and bright lights in the sky that happens, and you got to figure out why. And you got to come up with a reason why that's hopefully not going to scare you at night.
A different iteration that comes from the Ojibwe people believe that Thunderbirds were created by an entity named Nanaboso, who fights underwater spirits and punishes humans who break morality rules. And that they also believe that in the summer and the spring and the fall that they migrate with the other birds, which I think is a neat little aspect to it.
That is kind of cute.
Yeah.
So when they migrate, you're free to do all the bad stuff. That's when the purge happens. Yeah. Because when the Thunderbird migrates with the other birds, you're free for a little bit. It'll come back. Everyone be on your best behavior.
It's true. Maybe there's they have like an elf on the shelf system to make sure that the little kids are acting good. And
Yeah.
yeah. If you act bad during the spring and the fall, then in the summertime, the Thunderbirds are going to bring back coal, and you're not going to get any presents.
Yeah, they got a pidge on the fridge.
Yeah.
That's all I could think of.
There's a lot of like, you can see there's like a lot of like mythological, like needing to explain natural phenomenon like thunder and lightning, also needing a supernatural presence that is in charge of enforcing moral codes, which I feel like is also a thing humans do to try to impose a sort of moral order on the universe, which if without humans doesn't seem to really have much of one. Yeah, so like the Menominee tradition has a whole idea of Thunderbirds living on this giant mountain that floats in the western sky, and that they control rain and hail and are sometimes enemies of a villain, which are the great horned snakes that prevents them from taking over the earth. The Sioux people have a Thunderbird that's this solitary creature that is fast and can its job is to declare somebody to be a war chief. And also again, we see like, the same story kind of proliferating across North America, because the Thunderbird is also a protector against these dangerous reptilian monsters called the Unctalia. I'm sorry if there are any CU speakers in my audience, but yeah, this is you can kind of see though, like there's common threads as the story spread across the continent and got interpreted by different cultures for different purposes.
Yeah, for sure. And now Thunderbird is a mail client.
Yeah.
Made by the people who make Firefox.
Some people suggest that Thunderbird legends might have been inspired by things like discovering pterosaur fossils.
Ooh.
Though many of these depictions also are fairly different from prehistoric flying reptiles. But like, that is just another example of a kind of thing that could have explained it. Like if you found like
big
bones of an ancient bird, you might interpret that to be like, that's way
big
more
bird.
Even if that's not the explanation and there's not a lot of evidence to support it, it's a more likely explanation than that they saw flying saucers.
I would agree with that.
Again, there's no evidence of any of these things, and that a lot of this makes a lot of these are based on speculation and subjective analysis rather than actual investigation, which I think is just part of the whole thing that I feel like I could just slap that onto every episode of this show that we do, that it's just them saying stuff. There's no investigation involved. The whole show is very much them they just say stuff. They don't like if you were to make a video explaining the same thing, you would go into like the process and how you investigate and uncover, and they don't talk about the process very much. They're just like, this is a thing.
They just talk about, hey, here's this concept. Let's slap aliens on it and then move on as quickly as possible to the next topic.
Exactly. So like proponents like cherry pick stuff. They these things all seem much more sci-fi if you take them out of their cultural context, but also understanding this is a sort of thing we talked about on several episodes where like, if they were thinking the story through today, they might think differently because you're like, yeah, that sounds kind of like that sounds too much like technology, but they didn't have that kind of technology to think that this is kind of derivative of kind of like how there's like the Kimbaya airplane that is a depiction of a fish, but because they didn't really have the concept of an airplane, they didn't realize like if they had made it today, they'd be like, that fish looks a little bit too much like an airplane.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and so like there's like way more explanations that are at least better, at least require fewer assumptions about what it could be. And again, we're doing this again to indigenous people across the world, but they are taking away from the sort of symbolic meaning of all of this and the role of this, because this is like, myths are a really important part of any culture or religion, and that they're a reflection of the values, beliefs, and experiences of the societies that make them. And sort of taking that away from them is a downplaying of these things. And also making them literal when they shouldn't be also diminishes its power or its real function, which is to be a reflection of the society and what it values and believes. Instead of like, it kind of like turning it into a literal thing almost diminishes it in a way.
Yeah, I erased this from my sound pad and I feel really silly now, but it's that clip from Georgios Tsoukalos saying that myths are a way for us to peek into our past. And he's right, but again, he wields that in the wrong way by saying what they mean by all these myths is that it's aliens. But what's more interesting, in my opinion, is that these myths and these legends and this folklore and cultures and religions and things like that, they're interesting. They're an interesting peek at the people and the civilizations and what they believed, and not to be like, yeah, I don't know. We'll get into this more as the season goes on. But watching through Ancient Aliens, it is sort of a bummer how little they give humanity credit for, and it's all aliens.
Yeah. And the thing is that like myths are meant to be like they're meant to, like today with like fairy tales or like various other parts of like our folklore, they're meant to be to use symbolic and metaphoric language alongside with like vivid imagery to make profound truths, complex ideas understandable to various different peoples. And they use this vivid imagery and this like over the top stuff in order to make it memorable and interesting. So, this is the same thing as gods, heroes, monsters, magical objects. They're meant to represent things like abstract concepts, psychological states, or natural phenomena, because they're metaphors and symbols. And
Exactly. They're metaphors and symbols, and they're stand-ins for things. But never superheroes. Superheroes are never metaphors or stand-ins, and they're never, woke and have an agenda or anything like that. Even though people call superheroes American mythology, it's very different. They're just people beating up bad guys, and there's no symbol or reading into it or morality tale or anything like that.
It is very much though, like if 1,000 years from now, an Ancient Aliens like show was saying like, the ancient Americans wrote about a man who they said was from space, and he had infinite strength, laser eyes, and could freeze things with just his breath. Whoa. What could that be except for a depiction of an actual alien who spent his time on this world? And it's like, I
don't know, man. We make up art. We make up stories. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
And I can't, kind of pinch off the end of this topic without
pinch it off. Yeah. Pinch it off.
Without mentioning the fact that Ancient Aliens does seem to have certain people that they do this a lot to. In this case, it's a lot of stuff being done to Indigenous Americans who are trying to have their sort of their cultural symbols and identity taken away to be replaced with literal interpretations as part of like a greater process of colonizing their own myths, basically.
This sounds like a button that I gotta hit. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you've already started, but this is the part where Tristan makes you sad.
Yeah. The other part that I think is also like one that's like really rough to deal with is dealing with Elijah, because this is not the first, nor will it be the last. It's not even the first time this season that we've had to talk about them basically trying to take away from stories from Jewish canon that have to deal with the power of like faith and the sort of the power and oneness of the divine and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's like, again, it's like done to it's decontextualization of sacred stories and symbols done specifically to indigenous or non-Western cultures. And unfortunately, there are several like branches of those that have basically either that the American audience that are primarily consuming this show either have a prejudice against, or they just don't have a cultural knowledge of them so that they can exploit the fact that their audience has a knowledge gap about this subject in order to decontextualize it and make it look more science fiction than it is. Because your average Ancient Aliens watcher doesn't understand Hindu mythology. Your average Ancient Aliens listener doesn't have an understanding nor much respect for Native American stories and myths. And definitely, maybe not consciously, but doesn't have a whole lot of respect for Jewish people. And so there's,
Sure.
and that is another sort of like showing that there's like a little creeping anti-Semitism, which does love to show its face now and again within the ancient astronaut and pseudo-archaeology space. And the fact that we still have yet, now we're next season, spoiler alert, is going to be about angels, but we have yet to see, as far as I can recall, a depiction of anything from the New Testament considered aliens. And it's always a reference to the Torah and the Old Testament, which is fairly conspicuous. And
it's kind of weird when you think about it.
And I imagine that that's going to change at a certain point, but I also imagine that their argument that, like, I don't even know any of the New Testament, that like maybe one of the angels that helped that was like in the tomb when Jesus resurrected or something like that, to say that's an alien. But
aliens injected Jesus with some sort of experimental drug that brought him back to life. I can't actually look.
Listen, that feels like a thing that they would say, but that's the kind of thing that the viewers of Ancient Aliens would actually be like, no, that's too far.
They would be upset. Exactly. That's why I'm conflicted. I'm like, the viewers of Ancient Aliens would hate that, but it does feel like a thing that they would. I bet it's a thing they at least pitched as an episode.
But it's a thing that they wouldn't be able to say because when they're fucking with the culture that are the regular viewers of the show, then it's bad. When you're messing with their myths and their stories and their mythology, then it's too far. But
you can mess with the Old Testament though, because even though, Christians still believe in the Old Testament, that's old God. That's not the one that they like. They like the new fresh God, the Jesus one. They like him. But they'd never say that Jesus is an alien. I can't imagine they would ever do that. Or like Jesus is part alien hybrid. Jesus.
Maybe they will when we're like really deep in the cups of the seasons and like they're like now it's just for the Ancient Aliens heads. But we'll see.
We'll see.
I imagine. Krista Berg made a song basically saying that aliens came to see Jesus being born. So I would love to see my favorite. I would love to see if there is one where they try to make the claim that aliens are Christian. That would be fun. That they come to Earth because they think that this is where Jesus is.
Because they like Jesus so much.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Well, I want to wrap it up, I guess, but can we hear from our drunk uncle once again telling us about rockets at the family barbecue? Yeah, I just love it so much.
Just sipping on the mic.
When rockets are taking off, it's best to stand back and get out of the way.
Get out of the way.
And that's a lot of what the ancient legends are about.
Yeah, it is, dude.
When the gods came and went, may well have been just these rockets or other aerospace vehicles landing and taking off and making a lot of smoke and noise.
It's not slowed down at all, but I understand why Mom doesn't like me hanging out with him. So,
yeah. Your mom does want you to hang out with. It's us.
Yeah. If you want to know who your mom does want you to hang out with, good news. It's us. You can go follow us at Probs Not Aliens on Twitter and Blue Sky. And Tristan and I also do other stuff outside of this podcast, stuff that is in video form usually. Tristan, what are you up to?
I'm currently like waist deep in an episode of my YouTube channel Step Back, which is about the past and the present and how those are like connected and how you need to like understand the past, understand the present. And I'm doing a whole thing on economics and private equity firms and Red Lobster. It's a whole thing that I'm trying to get onto while also dealing with the fact that John Oliver kind of scooped me already.
That's okay.
If I wanted to, Scott, learn how Marvel ruined Wonder Woman, how would I do that?
Oh no, I can't remember how that video went. I hope it holds up. That's my YouTube channel, NerdSync, NERDSYNC. Tristan does this really fun bit where he pulls old videos of mine and recommends them. So I don't know if that one's any good anymore, if it holds up at all.
It's only 7 years old. It's from 2017, so I'm sure it's all right.
I was not politically active in I was a young whippersnapper who didn't know anything about the world. I wasn't woke yet. I don't think I was. Maybe I was. Who knows? Anyway, you can follow my YouTube channel, NERDSYNC. I said that already. I am also working on new videos. I'm like 3 turtle holes deep into some videos. And so we'll see how that goes. That was a joke. I'm not interested in turtles. You can follow the show over at Nebula, nebula.tv/probably not aliens. Tristan is not jumping in here to save me whatsoever. But if you do want to support this show financially and get some cool rewards, you can go to patreon.com/probsnotaliens, where you can listen to episodes early, get some cool rewards. And again, just support the show directly. We would love that because the show doesn't really make any money at all. And it takes up a lot of our time. And we want to keep doing it. We love doing it. That's the issue. That's the issue we're facing is we really love this show. We're not doing it because we have to. We're doing it because we want to. And we would like it to also help pay the bills.
Now, if you're struggling, people
like us.
If you're struggling and you don't have money, I get it. Late capitalism is a nightmare that we are all forced to live inside of. But there are ways that you can help the show and spread education against misinformation without spending money. And that is to leave a review. All that precious metadata that helps make a math equation decide that our podcast is more valuable is really helpful. And if you know somebody who would like the show, just tell them about it. Say, hey, this is a good show. You should listen to it. We get like probably like 1 or 2 notifications a week of people being like, someone being like, what's a podcast I should listen to? And then
and people tag us in it. And it's great. Tell your weird uncle at the family barbecue.
Tell David Childress about this show.
Tell David Childress specifically about this show.
That would be
I don't know.
That's a spicy spicy thing to do.
That would be funny, but I don't know how it would end. But if you want to send anyone our way to listen to the show, a great website is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everywhere where you can listen to the show, as well as our Patreon and other social medias that you can follow. But until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. Boom, 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 crack. Boom, boom. Probably! And Christopher Nolan, thanks for coming on the show. Sorry, we didn't let you plug your next project.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And then who's going to be the villain in Batman 4?
Ooh, they haven't done that one.
That's that deep cut, Chris. I'm surprised.